Okay.
You may want to save it to your desktop.
It was on my test desktop until just a little bit ago. Thank you, though. Why don't we go ahead and get started? Welcome today. Thank you, Robin, for being with me. I just wanted to start by saying hello and thank you for coming. I've been doing a number of panel discussions, and I think you're going to have somebody else join us in a little bit. So tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in working with seniors and what your mission is.
So my name is Robin, and thank you for having me. I've been a registered nurse since 1993, and a couple of years ago I got my Doctor of Nursing Practice degree, and the focus of my studies is on dementia care and the best way we can take care of people with any kind of dementing illness. So throughout my career since 1993, I've worked mostly with elderly people I worked in the hospital for a while, and then I worked in long-term care. And I learned that, you know, how things went with elderly people, where there might be gaps in care, and where things were strong and positive. So I went with that, and I developed Mind Matters, which is my business in Groton and in Old Saybrook, and we take care of people. Specifically, it's a daycare for adults with dementia. And unfortunately, with COVID, it is closed for a while, but I'm helping people through Zoom support groups, and I have caregiver consultations and things like that.
Oh, thank God for technology that you can still reach out to people. And I'm sure that you miss them when you can't see them. So it's really an opportunity for a two-way connection. If you didn't have that, then you would miss them, and they, of course, would miss you. So it's a two-way street, I would think.
It is, yeah. And my business is small, and we're very close to each other, and every client has the way to get a hold of me, my personal cell phone. They know the staff that work there. They have their numbers, so we're always texting and calling and answering questions and stuff, because it's hard. People now are at home without a break.
Oh, it's difficult, very difficult. Absolutely. So I'm wondering, what are you noticing with some of your senior clients? What should we call them? Members?
They're my clients. Yep, they're my clients. And so unfortunately, I've got a couple, two in particular, that come to mind, and they've had a significant decline in their cognitive abilities. Their families are having a little bit more of a hard time, with them at home without a break. But most of them, they're maintaining the status quo. It's been about 8 weeks now, so.
It's a long time for
it
to not be in their normal routine. And when you talk about cognitive abilities, maybe explain what that means. I'm not sure everyone knows what that means.
Sure. So I test people that come to me, and I do what's called the Fulstein Mini Mental State Exam. So, and it's got questions about your orientation. Do you know where you are? Do you know what this place is called? Do you know, there's a bunch of questions. Can you spell the word world? It assesses where, if they know what's going on around them and what they know. And if they have any recall ability, I might say, repeat after me, apple, book, and coat. And then a few minutes later, I ask them to recall that. And so we see where they stand. And most of my people that I have at Mind Matters specifically score very low on that exam. And that just gives us it's a screening tool to tell us, just basically how they're doing mentally and what their capabilities are. So I'm not going to ask them certain questions that might be tough for them to have recall, when you were in second grade, things like that. So.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I totally get that. So it's really an interesting service that you're providing, and pretty unique. And I don't think I've heard of too many things on the same venue, I guess, perhaps is the best word to describe it. Is that true or not true?
It is true. There's very few that specifically concentrate on people with a dementing illness like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease, one of these illnesses that cause dementia, which is a syndrome or a group of symptoms that consists of forgetfulness, inability to find words, memory loss, things like that.
Plus
So
long-term memory more than, well, you're doing both. You're looking at long-term memory and short-term memory. So you're looking at remembering Apple Book and code or whatever the third word was. Plus you're looking at,
good job.
yeah, plus you're looking at who they are, where they live, who's in the family, that kind of thing simultaneously, right?
Yep. And what they can do for themselves, if they can go to the toilet by themselves and do all of the tasks, from getting to the bathroom, using the toilet properly, washing their hands after, and pulling up their clothes. And same thing with feeding themselves. If once I put the food down, if they know how to use the fork, the knife, finger foods,
Right. So if they forget, maybe they wouldn't, one, eat, or two, just eat with their hands or fumble with it and get frustrated. I'm thinking if it was a container of applesauce or something like that, where sometimes those can be difficult, or yogurt is another example. Sometimes individual packages like that are difficult to open, they may not have the finger dexterity and the skills to be able to pull back the lid on it and get frustrated with that.
Correct. Yeah, that happens. So.
Well, interesting. Okay, so it sounds like you provide like a real kind of homey, natural kind of setting and program, and that people were coming to you and you were doing basically day services, if I'm understanding things correctly, so that the caregivers, for instance, if my mother was still alive and if she was living with me, I would perhaps have you be my break during the day, where she would go and spend some time with you and have some fun with some other people and socialize and do the different things. But then it would give me an opportunity to pursue my current tasks and things I'm interested in. Is that correct?
Exactly. That's exactly it. So it definitely is its own little niche. For people that are taking care of somebody else with a dementing illness. So, yep, people use me for a break for themselves so they can go to their own doctor's appointments. Some people, my clients, their families that take care of them work. Some people they just want their mom to have extra socialization, or their dad. So they come to me, and because socialization is super important, and we make sure that.
Robin, let me interrupt for just a second. What do you find if people don't have that opportunity to socialize and to be with you or with other people in a small group? Similar.
They are at risk for things that cause them to be lonely. Like they don't, they're not able to express themselves. They are at risk for depression and anxiety and things like that for not having a good social foundation. And even if day to day they don't always remember me, especially like after the weekend, or if they only are somebody that comes once a week, they might not remember my name, but they remember that they're doing something and that it's sort of familiar. So.
And they appreciate that, and they probably appreciate your gentle nature and your encouraging voice and the opportunity to do things.
I like to think so.
I'm sure. So you just bring up an interesting point, because I've been doing some phone calling to people just that I knew prior to COVID-19. I used to go to Crescent Point and spend time with some of the people in a poetry group with them. So just called up to just say, hey, I miss you on Tuesdays when I can't see you. And their voices just light up with joy and enthusiasm. Oh, well, first of all, who are you? And I have to remind them that I was the one that would sit and help them with poetry and that kind of thing. And then secondly, it would be, oh, we don't get to go out of our room. We are confined to our room, and that loneliness piece. And yeah, so tell me a little bit about that.
So, well, most of my people can't function high enough to like work the telephone or something unless somebody's helping them. So I don't really call them. I personally write them letters though. I've written everybody a card or a letter, and I use specific information like my name. I ask about their families. I mention things like it's spring and the weather will soon be good and maybe we'll be able to go outside. Mm-hmm. But I don't say, there's sickness. I don't remind them of certain things. But then they can look out the window and see and say, oh yeah, maybe it's going to be nice out and things like that.
Right.
I use the names of my staff members specifically, so that they, might have some recall, and I say that we're looking forward to seeing them soon, that kind of stuff. And
Nice.
I do know that, like, yeah, if you're sitting there depressed, especially if they don't have good interactions in their home, they might be watching a lot of TV and the news loops and loops and loops, and that might not be the best. There's things, maybe cooking show or National Geographic shows are usually met with a lot of smiles because they like animals and they're cute. And
Oh, absolutely. And my husband loves the cooking shows. And actually the other day I was watching a couple of cooking shows while everybody was still asleep, and it just inspired me to make the most amazing breakfast. So those, yeah, those things really work. And so that's really fun. So you're not really able, because of their ability and how they're functioning, to call them, but you're sending cards, so that's good. But I would imagine that you're in touch with a greater community, that you've heard and have had opportunities to meet with other people. Are you finding out what other people might be doing during this time of isolation?
yes and no. So I am very, I'm good friends with the senior center in Groton, especially, and they have stopped a lot of their services too, right? They prepare like the meals that they need to give out to the community, but a lot of people are just back in their loneliness, and I know, and it's just sad. I don't know how to reach people. I'm not exactly sure who needs to be reached, but I know that there are the town of Groton specifically has good programs through the senior center, Parks and Rec, the police department. They have a cognitive and dementia awareness program for safety that people can register for if they need help with their loved one with dementia. Especially if sometimes people will get like, why am I stuck in the house? And they might have a behavior that causes them to leave, and then they don't, then they're at risk for a whole lot of things now, especially, right? They've probably gone out with no mask. They don't know to stay socially distant. They don't know where they're going. So, but as for your question,
somebody kind of getting almost like criminalized, they're becoming,
right.
maybe they would get ticketed or licensed. I don't know what would happen, but that something might happen that they didn't have the cognitive abilities to be able to know that they needed to do this. And they would probably even be scared, I would imagine, if somebody was to come to the door with a mask on their face, because this is
or to be approached that way, right? So they do have, like I said, the Groton Police Department, and Officer Heather McKellen. She's wonderful, and the community dog McDonald is his name, and they go out and they help families through that, and they actually know how the best way to approach people, and so because it's frightening, and people will all of a sudden find strength to be like, get away, and
right. So it's a whole nother unusual time. So it does definitely take kind of a different approach, a different kind of mindset, I think, if anything else, for how to approach people and how to take care of people. And I'm wondering too, since I did mention that I was at Crescent Point, and I love Crescent Point. It's an amazing facility.
Me too.
But what happened though is that we weren't able to go back. And so the people that I was going to visit, and even they said their families, they can't see their families anymore. So I'm thinking that, and there's been cases, I guess, where people have lost loved ones and haven't really been able to see them towards the end of their life, and
that's so scary. They've lived their whole life, and then they die in this lonely way instead of with family around them, whether they're in a facility or at home. It's just scary, and if they do have a dementing illness on top of that, then they don't understand why they're so lonely and what's going on.
Using, right, and more anxiety provoking, I would think. Yeah. And you talked a little bit about orientation for time. And I know myself, sometimes I'll think, today's Thursday. I'll have to kind of like think about it in my head rather than that immediate, because it is kind of a warped sense of time. And it's like, what Zoom meeting do I have today? And I'm not getting out as much and not getting the fresh air that I would otherwise. So I would imagine for your population of people that you service, that's even amplified. How do you
Oh,
deal with that? Do
yes.
you have special techniques, calendars that you use, anything special like that?
At the facility, I use a whiteboard and I put today is, and then the date, and today I would have to look, so it's the
Right.
14th, because the same thing for me too. I'm not in my work week normally,
Right.
So, but I do encourage use of a whiteboard, or if people don't have one, they can just write it on a piece of paper, put it near where they might sit so that they know the date if they don't have a tangible newspaper. But that's what I do. And I put whatever the big things are of the day on that, like
Okay,
1 o'clock, bingo. But I don't fill it up completely because that's overwhelming and never stays on task.
right.
But if you put the most important things of the day so you can maintain a routine and they stay oriented to the day, even though they might not make the connection that it's 2020.
That doesn't
In their
really
head.
matter. So, the important thing is that we know that it's May, we know that it's Thursday, that it's May 14th right now, the middle of the month. And maybe food is going to be delivered, or, last week was Mother's Day, or, like you might look and say, why are those flowers here? And remember we had that kind of thing I would think would be really helpful. And
The last thing on my board at Mind Matters was that I had, it happened to be St. Patrick's Day was the last day we were open. So there was a big shamrock and a pot of gold, and it said spring, so it kind of orients them that way.
I always wonder how people function when there's something that goes on like Christmas in July and we're celebrating Christmas in the middle of summer, and we live in North America where it's cold typically in the winter. And if people get really confused by that, if they have a cognitive disability like that, that impacts them.
I've never done that.
You just go to the store, but I guess we're not having that problem anymore. We're not going out to the store, so we're not seeing that kind of thing.
Right.
So what advice would you have, Robin? I think it's almost, if anything, that we can do to service our community at this point in time is just to give them ideas. Like you already gave us a couple of really good ones, like don't overwhelm them, like person, place, and time. Maybe write notes to them that would encourage them and remind them, whiteboards for what day it is and what the big event might be for the day. What are some other ideas and strategies that you could suggest if all of a sudden I would have my 95-year-old friend living with me who had dementia? What other things would you suggest I try to do?
That's a good question, because I just found out from one of my clients today that they really want me to open back up, but they know that it has to be safe. And she had taken her mother out to the doctor, and she had to have a mask on, and to have the mask on and stay socially distant, and these kind of things that are in place now that they don't understand. So one thing that you can do to help with something like that is to give them frequent, gentle reminders and to demonstrate it with them. So we should really wash our hands. Let's go and do it together.
Right.
And I'm going to wear this mask because there's the sickness out there and we don't want to get this flu that's going around. And keep it simple in terms that they know, and do it with them. So put your mask on, help them put their mask on, help them wash their hands while you wash your hands. And then maybe, especially people that are living together, it's a little easier. So if you do decide to go out for a walk on a day like today where it's just so nice out, you might, other people are coming. You might want to just say, hey, Mom, let's come over here, and let them go by, and so that they stay socially distant.
Give them the 6 foot, but not really explain. I think sometimes we over explain things, but just gently have them kind of follow your lead a little bit.
Yeah.
What you're saying. Yeah.
It is, yeah. So.
Well, that's really good advice. And I think that's really helpful. And I remember one time when I was talking to you earlier, you said something about knowing your parent or knowing the person that you're taking care of or helping to take care of, knowing their routine a little bit. So what are some things like that that maybe we should be aware of? Like, we all think, I don't know, you should, I don't know, like drink water with your meal, or
Sure.
I don't know, like, you probably have tons of
Everything right
examples.
from the beginning when you wake up in the morning. What was their routine like? Did they take a shower every day? Did they take that shower in the morning? Were they somebody that took a shower every other day and then on Friday went and got their hair done? So you want to know those kind of things, because if you just demand that they do things your way, it's probably not going to go very well.
Right.
And there's things like, like you said, do you have coffee in the morning? Did you put milk in it? Do you put sugar in your tea? Do you use honey or lemon? All those little things. What do at 5 o'clock, did you like a cocktail every day? You could have a mocktail,
Right. So, and yeah, just kind of knowing their routines and knowing their habits, and a little bit about the preferences too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking about, like looking at somebody and maybe looking at how they walk. I would imagine that some of that is part of the process of what you do, like their gait and their balance. And
Sure.
yeah, so are there things like that we should be aware of or know about when we're looking at somebody and helping to take care of them?
Yeah, definitely, because there's a big problem with falls in the elderly. Okay, so people lose their ability with a dementic illness, whether it's from Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's, their coordination, their gait changes, which would be their pattern of how they walk. You might want to just make sure that they don't suffer any injuries to avoid falls. You might want to make sure they have on good shoes.
Oh, that's
path,
yep,
the path to the bathroom is clear for them, so that there's no clutter on the ground. And you want to make sure, that, and if you can't, like say the one bathroom is upstairs, or at night it's way down the hall, you might want to use a bedside commode, get night lights, and you want to have their assistive devices close by so they don't furniture walk, which would be putting their hands on tables and chairs to get to the next room. Because those could slip out or tip over lamps, things like that. And even if they're not leaving the house, you still want to make sure that their footwear is good. Slippers, come in a variety of forms, right? You want to make sure that they still have like the toe and the heel closed and a good bottom that doesn't slide. There's lots of beautiful, cozy, comfy socks, but they slide everywhere. You definitely don't want somebody doing a split.
Even the ones that are textured on the bottom, you don't really recommend.
Textured ones are better because they will have traction, but they don't have a lot of support in your foot. But they are good for people that might have swollen legs or feet from edema.
Sure.
Or if your mom only transfers from the chair, she sits in the wheelchair most of the time. Even when you help her get onto the toilet, you don't want her feet slipping because she doesn't have any tread on the bottom.
Right. Okay. Those are all just such things to know. And it seems like common sense, but if you're not dealing with it, I don't think on a regular basis, then it's not such common sense. You haven't thought about it before or dealt with it.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's all good advice. And do you encourage people to be in touch with other people and like extended family? And yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and because one thing that helps a lot too is if you know somebody is elderly, and they might, be starting with some issues with their cognitive impairment, whether it's from an Alzheimer's disease or an aging process or whatever it's from. But if you check on them once in a while, you might notice a decline in their status, or if they're maintaining the status quo well. So you want to have, check on your neighbors, check on your uncles and your aunts and people that are getting older, and make sure that, they have food or access to it. That's the best thing.
I saw something the other day that was in the newspaper, and I don't know if you saw it or not, but it was Pine Point School. And the kids at Pine Point were getting, I don't know what they called it exactly, but senior buddies basically, and had Zoom chats, I believe, was the process. And the kids were pretty adept, of course, with the technology. Our kids just grow up with that whole technology in their world. But then we're able to capture these most beautiful, almost like memoirs and histories of some of the seniors who are aging in place, and giving them a little bit of their take on their lives. Are you aware of those kinds of programs?
That intergenerational programming is so fantastic.
Tell me
Now,
about that.
so I don't know specifically what Pine Point School is doing, but props to them for doing something to bridge that gap. I mean, the people that are elderly have this wealth of information, and even if they don't remember all of the things all of the time, it's just they actually respond well to children, and children can learn so much about what it was really like to do something. What really was it like when you had to call the operator to get through instead of on your phone real fast, you know?
Right.
Like, what were cars really like, and the technology that you grew up with, the music that's changed. I mean, you know, to be quite honest, when I was a young nurse, music changed, and people would say, you know, they liked Lawrence Welk and Doris Day and this kind of stuff. And now the older generation listens to the Beatles and the Rolling Stones, and that's who's getting older now. But like, there's a big shift, and you don't want to miss out on their experience, and they're happy to share their experiences with people most of the time. And I know for my clients, we do some intergenerational stuff, because a lot of times, oddly enough, their ability to read doesn't deteriorate. They might not have retention, but they can read words. So they'll read simple books to the smaller children, or they'll just have a passive time where they just watch them do a craft. And they'll be like, isn't that wonderful? Isn't she precious? And they just seeing the people. But yeah, anything intergenerational, sharing stories. And I find that the elderly people, they want to know what the kids are doing too.
Absolutely.
Are you know, you're playing baseball? What's that? Like, what? Yeah, they want to know what you're doing in your sports and how you're doing in your school.
Nice. That's really nice. Well, I like that. So your advice then would, we should encourage more of that kind of activity, but it seems like there might be some resistance, and I don't know where the resistance comes from, if it's administration and different things, if it's HIPAA laws, I don't know what is, privacy laws that are keeping people from just having the opportunity to have those relationships.
Sure. There's, you know, certainly protection for the children that needs to, you know, especially like, I don't know what things are going on with Zoom, but like, so now you're exposed, you have the house behind you, you might, you know, people need to be protective of the kids. People need to be protective of the elderly people. It's usually not those extreme ages that are doing things wrong to each other. It's the people in the middle, so that are helping out. So you want to just, you know, that might be where some of the resistance comes from. And time, you know, is a big factor in why people don't stop as often as they can at an assisted living or a nursing home or a senior residence with their kids.
Oh, okay. Well, you know, it's just good to know. And I think one thing that I have found myself saying during COVID-19 is that time is not an excuse I can use anymore. And when COVID-19 and when shelter in place first was enacted, I was cleaning all my closets and making piles of things that I could either donate or reuse, repurpose, or find the proper place for whatever it was, because I thought there's no time or no excuse to say I don't have time to do it. So in this particular time, maybe it's an opportunity rather than something that would keep us from doing it.
It is.
So
Imagine having somebody older and more experienced, even just reading a book, you know, to a child, and then they get to see their reaction, and isn't that great? Or even just like playing with a balloon. I mean, it could be any number of things depending on the abilities.
That sounds great. That sounds great. Well, and I met the senior director, program director, I think, over at Groton Senior Center the other day.
Oh, yes.
And she was talking about activities such as name that tune kind of thing. And I was thinking how great that would be for cognitive, just the recall and, and just like, if people always say it's on the tip of my tongue. Well, getting it off of the tip and out into the air, I think is just such an important exercise. And
the Groton Senior Center has a connections program, and that is run by Tommy Stanley. And she is doing it by Zoom for people, and she's not even limiting it to people of Groton. Anybody, they can help their loved one with or without a cognitive impairment sit in front of the screen and do name that tune and talk about things, and it just sounds super wonderful. And I actually said, well, I want to sit in on the next one and see what this is.
Well, I guess it's open, so if we wanted to, we'd have to sharpen our memory, perhaps, of some of the tunes that she's playing to remember. But that sounds like a fun activity and a good thing to do. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about tips to help seniors, and we talked about Pine Point. How can we help the caregivers? I think sometimes the caregivers have tremendous responsibility and not necessarily the breaks and the support that they need. Do you have any advice or suggestions along that line?
When they are making up a routine, they need to include time for themselves. So they do need, because the caregiver really needs to take care of themselves. On alzsupport.org, there's a website, and that has a lot of local support for people, for the caregivers, for a person with Alzheimer's disease. But there's all sorts of resources on that, plus the Alzheimer's 24-hour hotline.
Oh, nice.
Connections to the Groton Police Department for their program in safety awareness. And but the caregivers, tips for the caregivers, I mean, if you can sneak away, like do an active game with your loved one with dementia, and then get them to do something quiet and calm so you can catch 20 minutes of reading or yoga or stretch yourself out. Especially in this time, it's very hard. I offer with the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce a Zoom Alzheimer's support group. It's been going on about twice a month. And so people can find that on my Facebook page or on the Greater Mystic Chamber of Commerce website, links to that. Because they do, and what better way to get information that's reliable than from a support group where people are going through the same thing, that that for my mother this worked, you might want to try that too. And then you can keep track of what worked and what didn't work, reevaluate if you need to, but it's coming from people with the same issues. So if you can, you'll probably do better for yourself if you can identify and get advice from people that are really, having the same concerns and problems that you are.
Sounds great. So it sounds like there's some support groups, and it sounds like there's websites to go to. And then I love the idea of just building it into your schedule. Just make time. And you say the same thing to a young mother, like basically if the baby's taking a nap, it's okay for you to curl up and take a little nap or read a book or call a friend or do something like that. You don't have to be up and scrubbing the floor or whatever you might do just because the baby is sleeping.
Right. If if your mom is taking a nap or watching Price is Right, you can take that opportunity to throw in some laundry and just sit down and watch with her. Maybe you just need to relax too.
Right. Because then I think the energy level is almost contagious at some of those, with some people, where it's almost like babies and older people, that if you remain calm and relaxed, and then they kind of get that vibe, and then that's kind of what gets transferred back and forth. And that's probably healthier and better for everybody. Yeah. What about other community resources and supports? Do you have any ideas along that line? How can we help people who might be, you've already mentioned Alzheimer's, you've mentioned the senior centers, and I think senior centers vary from town to town. Some have more things, some have fewer opportunities. Any
That
other?
is absolutely true. But in this region, the southeastern region of Connecticut, there are the Waterford Senior Center is very nice. The East Lyme Senior Center is a fantastic place. Groton, and there are some resources out there. The Alzheimer's Association is a nationwide association, and they also have a Connecticut chapter full of fantastic people, all talking the same talk about the best way to deal with people with that illness. Same thing with the Parkinson's Foundation, the Michael J. Fox Parkinson's.
Oh,
You can
nice.
get information from there. You need to get good information from a very reliable source. So, and that's probably your best bet. Sometimes reading stuff on Facebook is great, but sometimes you really want to make sure that you've gone to a reputable source for the information you need.
So I'm understanding or inferring that there might be some information out there that is not recommended and that you wouldn't want people to be looking at.
Yeah. I don't really know which, I know that I use the Michael J. Fox Foundation. I use Alzheimer's Association, and I use the town's specific resources, because I think that there are a lot of great people just in our area doing good things, and that's where the expert opinions are. And like the CDC, if you have a specific question about elderly or anything, but you don't want to just willy-nilly type into Google.
No, of course not. Right. Not reliable, right. And then, so we talked about the different community resources that are available. I wanted to tell you a little bit of an experience I had the other day. I met a gentleman and he was really upset, and we kind of alluded to this previously, but that he wasn't able to see his wife, and that if he did a FaceTime phone call with her, she has Alzheimer's and wasn't able to talk with him, but could just look at him, but almost like a blank stare, and just didn't seem to be recognition. And he expects it to be terminal, but hasn't been able to see her since probably March 17th. And so how could we change that? Because I think in her best interest, and tell me if I'm wrong, I would think in her best interest, she should be able to at least go to the window, and I'm imagining her touching the window with her husband touching the window on the other side, and hopefully her eyes would light up with recognition, and the two of them could at least have that kind of exchange. But he wasn't even able to do that. So why would that be? Why is he not able? Is he being prohibited from seeing his wife? What would your opinion be on that?
Well, I do have an opinion on that. Now, the bottom line is that it's the administration of the facility and their rules, and what they're trying to do is best. But, people need to socialize. They need to have human touch and contact. And I really think that what's going on is just a shame. And as much as people need to be protected, certainly somebody elderly with underlying comorbidities, they can't be exposed, right? Because it's just going to be, it could lead to their death ultimately, right. And it would be a lonely, horrible death at that, right? They're still not going to get anybody in there. So it's really, there's no great answer, but I don't understand going to the window, what that problem would be for that. That should be definitely allowed. I know that I have 2 family members that are past clients, and their loved ones are in homes. And those homes in this region have been doing a very good job. They have been sending, like, every time, and I know because I still send them cards, they actually take a picture of their loved one with the card, and they give it to them. They FaceTime once a week. They send pictures Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And this one person in particular happens to be in a place with levels, so they're, they can't get up to the 3rd floor, of course, but I know a lot of facilities are really doing the best they can. There's staffing, I'm sure, that is like,
So maybe they don't have enough certified nursing assistants or whoever the person would be who would make the person available. So it could be funding, it could just be, it could be regulations, it could be policy. Yeah, so it could be a number of things, but
It's really tough. It really is. And, some people, I don't know, we do have to protect our most vulnerable population. We don't know a whole lot about the virus that's going around. But there's people going in and out, there's screenings, and some people say the screenings are really helping, and some people are saying the screenings are bananas. It's hard to say. I know that for me right now, my facility is just closed, but I have that luxury, and I actually put out feelers today to my clients and said, what would make it for you to reopen? Like, do you want to see us taking temperatures? Do you want to know what we're doing to clean the facility? Do you want the staff in masks? Knowing that your loved one isn't going to stay socially distant because they're going to just make a beeline for somebody with something. They're all going to touch the ball, like how we're going to hand wash. Like, what would make it so that you want to send your person back to Mind Matters? And I'm still waiting for people to come in, but people are excited for me to want to open. But I think ultimately they want to make sure that their family member's not going to catch something and going to a hospital.
absolutely. And yeah, it's all about being safe. It's health first, but then unfortunately with this, I think it involves the mental health and the loneliness, and then again, what happens as a result of that and the more rapid decline. I think what you're doing is helping people to have good aging in home life experiences and good senior experiences for as long as they possibly can.
And you need to consider who they're at home with. There's a lot to going into aging in place. And I think I get myself all worked up and overwhelmed about, boy, when I'm getting older, what's going to happen? Am I going to live in this house, that house? How's my husband going to be? And there's a number of things, that people can do to get ready and prep for that. But you just never know. And I feel so bad that people, they're going through this and they're alone. That's so sad, because I know how sad I am that I don't get to see my friends except for, through the phone or the computer. I mean,
Well, even if you go over to somebody's house, you still go with the mask on and you stay 6 feet away and you socially distant for both of your benefits.
Mother's Day at my house was in the backyard and everybody was apart from each other. I mean, at least we got to say hi, but it's not the same.
It's the new normal. Absolutely. It's the new normal. Yeah. Well, Robin, we've covered a bunch of different ideas and topics. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you'd like to share or bring up? I feel smarter and better for having been in your company once again. Thank you.
Thank you. No, I love doing this show. I'd love to get the word out in any way I can help people. Anybody can go to my website. It's mindmattersct.com. My email is right in there. And they can call, text, send me, just if they have questions or want some advice, I'm happy to help. I'm here to help people. So
I love it. And I'm sure you're just a ray of sunshine. So thank you for who you are. And thank you for the gifts that you give to everybody. And hopefully we can change it so there's better staffing or whatever it takes, so we can actually see our elderly if they do end up in an independent living facility or nursing home. So thank you again.
Yep, and people should really know that this region's doing a good job, from what I've heard of my friends that work for big companies that own nursing home and assisted living. So people are doing a good job. They're doing the best they can out there.
Oh, I'm sure they are. I know I've seen wonderful programs that go on. So,
and you're doing a great job getting word out. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Robin, good to see you again. Thanks so much for being with me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.